My husband became the bank manager and marked the promotion by serving me divorce papers the very same day. I signed without a tear and walked away quietly, while he laughed with his coworkers about shedding dead weight. Years later, he traced me through bank records, finding only the silence of ignored calls and messages. That man looks through you, not at you. My mother's words hung in her kitchen like smoke I couldn't wave away. Thanksgiving dinner was over. The dishes were done. My brother Marcus had left with his wife an hour ago, but Mom had cornered me with that look. The one that said she'd been holding her tongue too long. Mom, that's not. Don't. She twisted the dish towel in her hands, her voice tight with something between worry and anger. Don't defend him to me, Lizzie. I've watched you shrink yourself for 8 years while that man takes and gives nothing back. He's studying for his promotion. Once he gets manager, things will change. Is that what he tells you? She laughed, bitter and sad. Baby, he's already changed. You just haven't noticed you're not part of his future anymore. The words landed like physical blows. I wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons she was wrong. But standing in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she taught me to bake bread and warned me about boys who made big promises, I couldn't find the words. He thanked me last week, I said weakly. Said he couldn't do this without me. And how much did that thank you cost you? Everything. My mornings processing medical bills in a cramped office where the fluorescent lights buzzed constantly and made my head ache. My evenings serving wine and steaks to couples who celebrated anniversaries while I wore comfortable shoes and swallowed my exhaustion. My savings account that never grew past $300. My dreams that got smaller each year until they fit inside Frank's shadow. Marcus called me yesterday. Mom continued, gentler now. He's worried about you too. Says Frank's using you like a stolen credit card, maxing it out before reporting it missing. I should have been angry at them for talking about my marriage behind my back. Dad, I just felt tired. So impossibly tired. I love him, I whispered. Mom pulled me into a hug that smelled like her lavender soap and holiday cooking. I know you do, baby. But does he love you? Or does he love what you do for him? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the question had been sitting in my chest for months, growing heavier each time Frank came home late smelling like cologne I hadn't bought him. Each time he canceled plans because of networking events I wasn't invited to. Each time he said soon babe soon, while I worked myself into the ground funding his climb up the corporate ladder. The drive home took 40 minutes through empty holiday streets. Every red light gave me time to think about things I'd been avoiding. Like how Frank introduced me at bank functions as Elizabeth, very supportive instead of my wife. Like the credit card statements I found hidden in his gym bag, showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Like the way he'd started closing his laptop quickly whenever I walked into the room. Our apartment was dark when I got home except for the kitchen light. Frank was asleep at the table, his head resting on an open certification manual. Study materials spread around him like a paper fortress. Coffee cups forming rings on pages I couldn't read even if I tried. This was how I found him most nights. Dedicated. Focused. Working toward something. I set my purse down quietly and started gathering the coffee cups. That's when I saw his laptop still open, the screen dim but not off. The browser showed a page I'd never seen before. Pinterest. A board titled New Chapter. My hand hovered over the touchpad. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. But Mom's question echoed in my head. Does he love you or does he love what you do for him? I clicked. The screen filled with images of bachelor condos. Sleek furniture. Minimalist designs. Everything modern and expensive and nothing like our cramped apartment with my grandmother's old couch and his endless stacks of banking books. The captions made my stomach turn. Fresh start. Finally free. Manager life begins. This is what success looks like. I scrolled through 20, maybe 30 pins. Each one a window into a future he was planning without me. Each one proof that while I'd been working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, he'd been designing his exit. One pin showed a luxury apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd written underneath, almost there. New life waiting. Almost there. 8 years of my double shifts. 8 years of ramen noodles and skipped birthdays and canceled vacations because he needed to focus. 8 years of being called supportive like it was my job title instead of wife. I closed the laptop carefully and looked at Frank sleeping at the table. In the dim kitchen light he looked younger. Vulnerable. Like the guy I'd married who worked as a bank teller and promised we'd build something beautiful together. When had that promise become singular? When had we turned into I, and left me behind? The cologne bottle on the bathroom counter caught my eye when I walked past. Expensive. Designer. Something with a French name I couldn't pronounce. I picked it up and read the price tag still attached to the bottom. $240. $240 for cologne while I wore scrubs with small bleach stains and served food in shoes held together with super glue. I unscrewed the cap. The scent was rich, sophisticated. Nothing like the drugstore body spray he'd used for years because we couldn't afford better. This was the cologne of a man who'd arrived somewhere. Somewhere I hadn't been invited. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane, my best friend since college. You survived the family dinner? I stared at the message. At the cologne bottle in my hand. At Frank's laptop in the other room hiding his Pinterest board of futures that didn't include me. My mom says Frank looks through me, not at me. I think she's right. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Liz, we need to talk. Like really talk. Not the version where you defend him and I pretend to believe you. I set the cologne down and walked back to the kitchen. Frank was still asleep, mouth slightly open, one hand resting on his certification manual. The same manual I'd paid for 3 months ago when he said it was essential for his next promotion. His phone sat face up on the table. The screen lit up with a notification. Vanessa, can't wait for Monday. Dinner was amazing tonight. You're going to crush that manager interview. Dinner. Tonight. Thanksgiving night when he told me he was too tired from the long week and needed to stay home and study. I picked up his phone. No password. He'd never needed one because I'd never looked. Never questioned. Never doubted. The messages with Vanessa went back months. Nothing overtly romantic but intimate in ways that made my chest tight. Inside jokes. Late night conversations. Photos from bank events I hadn't known existed. One message from 2 weeks ago. Elizabeth still doesn't know? Frank's response. No. And she won't. Once I get manager I'll handle it. She won't make a scene. She's too nice for that. Too nice. Too nice to question. Too nice to complain. Too nice to notice I was being used up and discarded like something that had outlived its purpose. I set the phone down exactly where I'd found it. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. But something inside me had shifted, hardened into a shape I didn't recognize yet. Frank stirred, lifting his head from the table. His eyes were bleary with sleep. Hey, he mumbled. When'd you get back? Just now. He stretched, yawning. How was your mom's? Fine. Good. That's good. He stood, gathering his study materials without really looking at me. I'm going to bed. Big day tomorrow. Got to review before the interview Monday. The manager interview. Yeah. He smiled and it was genuine in a way that made everything worse. This is it, Liz. Everything we've worked for. He said we, but he meant I. Everything I'd worked for. Everything I'd sacrificed. Everything I'd given up so he could stand at the finish line and call it his own achievement. Frank, I said as he headed toward the bedroom. He turned. Yeah. I almost said it. Almost told him I knew about the Pinterest board, the cologne, the dinner with Vanessa, the messages about handling me once he got what he wanted. But something stopped me. Some instinct that said silence was more powerful than confrontation. That I needed to see how far he'd go. How complete his betrayal would be. Nothing, I said. Good luck Monday. He smiled again, already half asleep, already mentally rehearsing his interview answers. Thanks, babe. Couldn't do this without you. The words that used to feel like love now felt like an invoice. He disappeared into the bedroom, and I stood alone in our kitchen surrounded by his certification books and coffee-stained study guides and evidence of a life he was building without me. Mom's question echoed again. Does he love you or does he love what you do for him? I finally had my answer. And it was going to cost him everything. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Frank's Pinterest board. Almost there. New life waiting. The words played on repeat like a song I couldn't turn off. By morning I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Wasn't going to give him the chance to lie or explain or make promises he'd never keep. I was going to show up to his promotion ceremony, smile and see exactly how far he'd go. If he was planning to discard me I wanted to watch him do it. Wanted to see the man I'd spent 8 years building up reveal who he really was. Frank left early that morning. Kissed my forehead on his way out. That absent, automatic gesture that used to mean something. Big day, he said, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. One of the new ones. The expensive ones I'd paid for without knowing they were costumes for a performance I wasn't invited to watch. Good luck, I said. He paused at the door, briefcase in hand. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Guilt maybe. Or just nerves about the interview. Thanks for everything, Liz. Really. I know it's been a lot of years, but we're finally here. That word again. So easy for him to say. So meaningless. The door closed and I sat alone in our apartment surrounded by his success. The certifications framed on the wall. The banker's desk he'd insisted we buy last year. The closet full of suits I'd funded. Trophies of a victory I'd never share. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank with just an address and a time. 6 p.m. The bank's event space downtown. No, can't wait to celebrate with you. No, this is our moment. Just logistics. Like I was a task on his to-do list. Attend promotion ceremony. Bring wife. Dispose of afterwards. I called in sick to my morning shift at the medical billing office. Sandra would cover for me, she always did. Then I went shopping. The dress I found wasn't expensive, but it wasn't clearance either. Navy blue, fitted, the kind of thing that made me look like I belonged somewhere nice. I charged it to the credit card Frank didn't know I'd been monitoring. The one where he'd been taking Vanessa to dinner. In the fitting room mirror, I barely recognized myself. When had I stopped buying things that made me feel good? When had every purchase become a calculation of what we could afford versus what Frank needed? I practiced smiling in my car before heading to the venue. Not the tired smile I wore at the restaurant. Not the apologetic smile I gave Frank when I asked for anything. A real smile. The kind that didn't reach my eyes but looked convincing enough from a distance. The bank's event space was downtown, all glass and modern architecture. The kind of place that screamed success. Silver balloons spelled out, "Congratulations, Frank," across one wall. There was a champagne fountain. A catering spread that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I recognized some faces from previous bank functions. The ones where I'd been introduced as Elizabeth, very supportive, and then promptly forgotten. They were clustered around Frank like he was royalty, laughing at his jokes, toasting his achievement. And there was Vanessa. Sharp suit. Perfect hair. Standing just a little too close to Frank with her hand on his shoulder. The gesture was casual, familiar. The kind of touch that came from months of dinners and late-night conversations and shared secrets about handling inconvenient wives. Frank saw me approaching. His smile faltered for half a second before he recovered, shifting into something I'd never seen before. Professional. Distant. Like I was a client he needed to let down gently. "Elizabeth," he said. Not Liz. Not babe. Elizabeth. Formal. Final. "Congratulations," I said, my practiced smile firmly in place. "You must be so proud." "We are," Vanessa interjected, and the "we" made my stomach turn. Frank's worked incredibly hard for this. Frank's worked. Not we've worked. Not Elizabeth and Frank have worked. Just Frank. He has, I agreed, my voice steady. "Must be nice to finally get what you wanted." Something flickered in Frank's eyes. Guilt? Relief? I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe I'd never been able to. He reached into his briefcase, the leather one I'd saved 3 months for last Christmas, and pulled out a manila folder. Thick. Official looking. "What's this?" I asked, though somewhere deep down I already knew. "Your exit package." He held it out like a business transaction. Like he was handing me a performance review instead of the end of 8 years. The room's chatter died in sections. Conversations stopping mid-sentence as people turned to watch. This was entertainment for them. Drama at the promotion party. Something to gossip about later over drinks. I opened the folder. Divorce papers. Every line filled out. Every box checked. My signature line blank and waiting. My name misspelled on page 3. Elizabeth with an Z instead of a Z. 8 years and he couldn't even spell my name correctly on the paperwork ending our marriage. "I don't understand," I said, though I understood perfectly. "Manager-level positions need appropriate partners." Frank's voice was loud enough for the circle of colleagues to hear. Like he was giving a presentation. "I needed you to get here, Elizabeth. You were essential to that process. But now I need someone who can keep pace with where I'm going." Vanessa shifted beside him and I saw it then. The way she looked at him. The way he angled his body toward hers. This wasn't new. This had been happening for months, maybe longer, right under my nose while I worked myself into exhaustion funding his climb. "Someone like Vanessa?" I asked. Frank had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Barely. This isn't about her. This is about us not being compatible anymore. About different life stages. Different life stages. Like I was an old car he'd driven until he could afford the upgrade. A woman I'd never met whispered to the man beside her. "Finally," she said, just loud enough for me to hear. "He's been miserable for years. Miserable. While I'd worked 2 jobs. While I'd paid every bill. While I'd sacrificed every dream so he could chase his." Frank cleared his throat. "You're dead weight, Liz. I was carrying you and I can't anymore. Not where I'm going." Dead weight. The room spun for just a second. Not from shock. I'd known this was coming the moment I saw his Pinterest board. But hearing him say it out loud in front of all these people with Vanessa standing right there looking sympathetic. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized into something hard and cold and clear. I looked at the faces around me. Some pitying. Most amused. All of them complicit in this public execution Frank had orchestrated. This was intentional. He'd done this here now in front of his colleagues, to make sure I wouldn't make a scene. Wouldn't fight back. Would be too humiliated to do anything but slink away quietly. He'd called me too nice in his text to Vanessa. Too nice to question. Too nice to complain. He was right about one thing. I was done being nice. I reached into my purse and pulled out the pen I'd brought. The one I'd intended to use signing mortgage paperwork for a house we'd never buy. My hand was steady. My breathing was calm. I signed every page without reading a single word. My signature clear and firm and final. Frank blinked. "What, you're not going to fight you? Beg you to reconsider? Make a scene?" I set the completed papers on the gift table next to a bottle of champagne someone had brought. Why would I do that, Frank? You just told me I'm dead weight. Why would I want to stay attached to someone who sees me as a burden? The room had gone completely silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Congratulations on your promotion, I said, my voice clear enough for everyone to hear. And congratulations on being single. I'm sure you and Vanessa will be very happy together. At least until she realizes you're the kind of man who uses people up and throws them away when they're no longer useful. Vanessa's face went pale. Frank opened his mouth, then closed it again. I grabbed a handful of bacon-wrapped shrimp from a passing server's tray. These look expensive. Thanks for the send-off meal. Then I walked toward the exit. Chin up, shoulders back. Every step measured and deliberate. Behind me, the whispers erupted. Vanessa's voice rose above the others. Did she just? I didn't turn around. Didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing my face. Didn't let them see that my hands were shaking or that my chest felt like it was caving in. Outside, the evening air was cool against my face. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Holding it for 8 years, maybe longer. I got in my car and drove. Not home. I couldn't go back to that apartment full of Frank's things and my sacrifices. I drove to the nearest grocery store parking lot and sat there in my new dress, eating expensive bacon-wrapped shrimp while my marriage dissolved in a conference room 2 miles away. My phone buzzed. Diane. How's the party? I looked at the divorce papers on my passenger seat. And my signature still wet. At the parking lot stretching out around me like a metaphor for my future. Empty but mine. Just sign my freedom. Turns out dead weight can walk away on its own. Diane called me back 30 seconds later. What do you mean you signed your freedom? I was still sitting in the grocery store parking lot, my new dress wrinkled, mascara probably smudged, eating the last piece of shrimp. He handed me divorce papers at his promotion party. Called me dead weight in front of everyone. So I signed them. Silence. Then, you signed them? Right there. Right there. Didn't read a word. Just signed and left. Oh my God, Liz. Her voice cracked. Are you okay? Where are you? King's Market parking lot on 5th. Eating his expensive appetizers and planning my next move. Your next move? What next move? I looked at our apartment building across town, the one I could barely afford but had paid for alone while Frank built his career. I'm leaving. Tonight. I'm taking everything that's mine and I'm disappearing. Disappearing where? I don't know yet. But somewhere he'll never think to look. Diane was quiet for a moment. Do you need help? No. I need to do this alone. But Diane, when he calls you and he will, tell him I moved somewhere far. Antarctica. The moon. I don't care. Liz. Promise me. She exhaled slowly. I promise. But text me when you get wherever you're going, okay? I need to know you're safe. I started the car. I will. And Diane? Thanks for not saying I told you so. Oh, I'm saving that for later. When you're settled and happy and can laugh about what an idiot he was. I drove back to the apartment at 8:30. Frank wouldn't be home for hours. He'd be celebrating with his colleagues, probably with Vanessa hanging on his arm. I had time. The first thing I did was call in sick for the rest of the week. Both jobs. Sandra at the medical billing office didn't ask questions. Take care of yourself, she said, and I wondered if she knew. If everyone had known except me. Then I started making calls. The joint checking account first. The one where my paychecks had been deposited for 8 years while Frank's went to his investment account I'd never been allowed to access. I withdrew my half, exactly $5,300, earned from shifts where my feet bled and my back screamed. The bank teller processed it without comment, but her eyes held something like sympathy. Closing the account too, I said. Both signatures required for that, ma'am. Then remove my name. Immediately. She typed for a moment. Done. Is there anything else? Yes. If Frank Caldwell comes in asking about this transaction, tell him you can't discuss it. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. Then she nodded once. Standard privacy protocol. Of course. Next came the utilities. Every single one was in my name because Frank's credit had been garbage when we met. Too many maxed out cards, too many missed payments. I'd put everything in my name to help him to build our life together. Now I was tearing it down. Electricity disconnection scheduled for tomorrow morning. The representative asked if I was sure. Completely sure, I said. Internet cancelled. Water service terminated. Even the premium cable package Frank used to watch financial news every morning. Gone. I wanted him to come home to darkness. To silence. To understand what it felt like when your foundation disappeared without warning. The health insurance was next. My plan through the medical billing office covered both of us. I called HR, explained I was getting divorced and requested Frank's immediate removal. That takes effect at the end of the month, the woman said. Can you make it sooner? Technically, divorce is a qualifying life event. I can process it as of today if you have documentation. I took a photo of the divorce papers Frank had given me and emailed it. Sending now. Received. Okay, Mr. Caldwell will be removed from coverage as of today. He'll get a notification letter. Good. Let him scramble for new insurance. Let him feel what it's like when someone pulls the safety net without asking. By midnight I was packing. Not everything, just what mattered. My grandmother's jewelry box, the one with her wedding ring I'd planned to pass down to my own daughter someday. My mother's china, the set she'd given me when Frank and I got married, each piece wrapped carefully in newspaper. That's when I found the credit card statement. It was stuffed in Frank's gym bag, crumpled like he'd meant to throw it away but forgot. I smoothed it out on the kitchen table and read through the charges. Hotels. 3 different ones over the past 4 months. All in our city. All on nights when Frank said he was working late. Restaurants I'd never been to. Dates I remembered clearly because I'd been working double shifts while he was supposedly networking. Jewelry store. $1,500. I'd never received jewelry from Frank. Not for our anniversary, not for my birthday. But someone had. My hands were steady as I photographed every page. Then I kept looking. In his desk drawer I found receipts. Dinner receipts with 2 entrees, 2 drinks, 1 dessert to share. Movie tickets, he told me he was at a financial conference that weekend. A hotel room service bill from the night of his assistant manager promotion. In his sock drawer, hidden under the expensive dress socks I'd bought him last Christmas, I found a birthday card. The front had champagne glasses. Inside, in feminine handwriting, to many more nights like last Tuesday. You make me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Vanessa. The promotion party wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time he'd stopped hiding it. I sat on our bedroom floor surrounded by evidence of months, maybe years, of betrayal, and I didn't cry. Crying would mean I was surprised. Crying would mean I hadn't already known somewhere deep down that Frank had checked out of our marriage long before he'd handed me those papers. Instead, I took pictures of everything. Every receipt. Every charge. Every piece of proof that while I'd been working myself to exhaustion, Frank had been building a different life. I created a folder on my phone labeled, just in case, and backed everything up to cloud storage. I didn't know if I'd need it. Didn't know if there'd be a fight over assets or alimony or anything else. But I'd learned one thing clearly. Trust nothing Frank said and document everything. By 2 in the morning my Honda was packed. Clothes, books, kitchen items that were actually mine. The art from my college years that Frank always said was amateur. Everything that mattered fit into my small car, and everything that didn't matter could stay here with him. I left his things exactly where they were. His certifications on the wall. His desk. His closet full of suits I'd paid for. Trophies of a success that was never really ours. On the kitchen counter I left a note on the back of a utility bill. Electricity disconnected. Internet cancelled. Water shut off. You wanted to know what dead weight does? Stops carrying you. Good luck with your fresh start. I locked the door for the last time and drove north with no destination in mind. The highway was empty at that hour. Just me and a few long-haul trucks and the white lines disappearing under my headlights. I drove until my eyes burned, until the anger in my chest started to feel less like fire and more like ice. At a rest stop outside Seattle, I bought terrible coffee from a vending machine and unfolded a road map across my hood. The sky was just starting to lighten, that pre-dawn gray that makes everything look unreal. Seattle. The name stood out on the map. Big enough to disappear into. Far enough that Frank would never casually run into me. Different enough that I could build something new without his shadow following me. I pulled out my phone and called Diane from the payphone outside the rest stop. My cell phone would have GPS. I wasn't taking chances. "It's me," I said when she answered, voice thick with sleep. "Liz? Where are you?" "Frank's been calling everyone. Your mom, Marcus, me. He sounds frantic." "Good. Tell him I moved to Alaska. Or Europe. Tell him I joined a commune or became a park ranger. I don't care what you tell him as long as it's nowhere near where I actually am." "Where are you actually?" I looked at the road stretching north, at the mountains in the distance turning purple with dawn. "Somewhere he'll never find me. And Diane? If he keeps calling, tell him to stop. Tell him I signed his papers and he got exactly what he wanted. He's saying it's a mistake. That he didn't mean it. That you're misunderstanding." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course he is. The utilities are cut off and his comfortable life just collapsed. Tell him I understand perfectly. For the first time in 8 years I finally understand." By the time I reached Seattle, the sun was fully up. I found a cheap motel and slept for 4 hours. When I woke up, I started apartment hunting online. The studio I found was small, barely 400 square feet, but it had a view of the Space Needle through one window and it was mine. Completely mine. The landlord was an older woman named Mrs. Chin who met me at the building with keys and a kind smile. "Moving to Seattle?" she asked while I filled out paperwork. "Starting over," I said simply. She studied my face. I probably looked exhausted, maybe a little broken, and nodded like she understood everything I wasn't saying. "First month half price then," she said. Everyone deserves a second chance at a first start. I moved in that afternoon with an air mattress, a suitcase of clothes and my grandmother's jewelry box. No forwarding address filed. No social media updates. No trail of breadcrumbs. That night, I sat on my air mattress eating Chinese takeout from the place downstairs and filling out job applications online. My phone buzzed constantly. Frank calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails I deleted without listening to. I blocked each number methodically. Outside my window, Seattle glowed against the darkening sky, and for the first time in 8 years, the future felt like mine to build. Frank had erased me from his life in a conference room full of strangers. Now I was erasing myself on my own terms. And unlike him, I wasn't leaving any trace behind. The air mattress developed a slow leak on my third night in Seattle. I woke up at 4 in the morning lying on the hard floor, my back aching, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. Frank, the divorce papers, the drive north, the studio apartment that was mine and only mine. I got up and made instant coffee in the tiny kitchenette. Through the window, the Space Needle was lit up against the pre-dawn darkness, and somewhere in that view I found something close to peace. By 7 I was dressed and ready for job interviews. I'd applied to 15 positions over the weekend, and 3 had already responded. The first 2 were disasters. One wanted me to start at an entry-level salary that was less than what I'd made at the medical billing office. Another had a manager who reminded me so much of Frank I walked out mid-interview. The third was different. Catherine Walsh ran the billing department for a mid-sized tech company in South Lake Union. Her office was bright, organized, and covered in photos of hiking trips and family gatherings. She looked at my resume for maybe 30 seconds before setting it down and studying me instead. "You're overqualified for this position," she said. My stomach dropped. "I can. But something tells me you need a place where people actually respect the work you do." She leaned back in her chair. "Am I right?" I opened my mouth to give some professional answer, something polished and interview appropriate. Instead what came out was, "Yes." Catherine smiled. "You start Monday. Pay is $62,000 plus benefits. Hours are 8 to 5, no weekends unless you volunteer for them. We have actual lunch breaks and nobody checks email after 6. Sound good?" I almost cried right there in her office. "That sounds perfect." "Good. Welcome to the team, Elizabeth." That first week at the new job felt like waking up from a bad dream. My coworkers, Jessica, Thomas, and an older woman named Linda, actually invited me to lunch on my second day. They asked about my weekend plans. They noticed when I learned a new system and said things like, "Great job," or "You're picking this up fast," like they actually meant it. On Friday, Jessica brought in cupcakes for her birthday and insisted I take 2. "You look like you need extra sugar," she said, not unkindly. "New job stress." Something like that. Thomas overhead. "Don't worry, Catherine's tough but fair. You'll do great here. We actually keep people longer than 6 months, which is rare in tech." For the first time in almost a decade, I felt like a person instead of a pay stub. Like my work mattered beyond funding someone else's ambitions. The coffee shop near my apartment became my Saturday morning ritual. That's where I found the flyer for Patricia's hiking group. Bright pink paper with a photo of 6 women standing on a mountain summit, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. Women's Hiking Collective. All levels welcome. First hike free. I'd never hiked in my life. Frank always said it was a waste of time when we could be doing something productive, which usually meant him studying while I worked. But something about that photo drew me in. Those women looked happy. Free. Like they weren't carrying anyone's weight but their own. I texted the number on the flyer and got a response within minutes from someone named Patricia. Sunday 7 a.m. Meet at the Rattlesnake Ledge trailhead. Bring water and decent shoes. We'll take care of the rest. That first Sunday hike nearly killed me. My legs screamed after the first mile. My lungs burned in the thin mountain air. I fell behind the group almost immediately, stumbling over roots and rocks while trying to catch my breath. Patricia appeared beside me like she'd been waiting. She was maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled back in a braid and the kind of steady presence that came from years of handling emergencies. Later I'd learned she'd been a trauma nurse for 30 years. "First time?" she asked. "That obvious?" "You're doing great. Just pace yourself. The mountain's not going anywhere." We walked together for a while, her matching my slower pace without complaint. The other women, ranging from 20s to 50s, stopped periodically to wait, offering water and encouragement without making me feel like a burden. At the top, looking out over the Cascades with the morning sun turning everything gold, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Real freedom. The kind that came from standing on my own 2 feet in a place Frank had never been and would never find me. Patricia handed me her water bottle. "Whatever you're running from," she said quietly, "it can't follow you up here." I took a long drink and looked at the valley spread out below us. "You're right." The messages started 2 weeks after I disappeared. Frank called my old number first, the one I'd canceled before leaving. When that didn't work, he started calling everyone else. Diane texted me screenshots of his voicemails. Tell Elizabeth we need to talk. This is ridiculous. Tell her she's being childish. We can work this out. Tell her I made a mistake. Please. Just tell her to call me. Diane called me after the 10th message. He sounds unhinged, Liz. What do you want me to do? I was sitting in my studio apartment watching rain slide down the window, eating takeout pad thai and feeling more content than I had in years. Tell him I moved to Europe for a medical research position. Make it sound permanent. You want me to lie? I want you to make him stop looking. Can you do that? She was quiet for a moment. Yeah. I can do that. The calls to Diane stopped, but they didn't stop everywhere else. Marcus texted me a week later. Your ex is calling me asking where you are. What should I tell him? Tell him you haven't heard from me. Have you heard from Mom? He called her last night. He said he was crying. That gave me pause. Frank crying. Frank, who'd handed me divorce papers at his promotion party and called me dead weight in front of his colleagues, was now crying to my mother. I called Mom that evening. She answered on the first ring. Lizzie. Thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. Frank called here last night. Late. Said he made a terrible mistake and needed to find you. What did you tell him? That some mistakes you don't get to take back. Her voice was firm. That boy had 8 years to treat you right and he chose to humiliate you instead. He doesn't get to cry about it now. Thanks, Mom. Where are you, baby? Really? Somewhere safe. Somewhere he won't find me. I'll tell you eventually, but not yet. I need time to just be me without anyone knowing where I am. He understood. Of course she did. Call me once a week so I know you're alive. That's all I ask. I will. I promise. Everything was fine for about 3 weeks. I was settling into my routine. Work, hiking on weekends, slowly furnishing my apartment with secondhand finds. I'd even made friends with my neighbor, an art student named Riley who played guitar badly but with enthusiasm. Then one Tuesday, Jessica from work found me during lunch break. Her face was concerned. Hey, weird question. Do you know someone named Frank? My stomach dropped. Why? She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo someone had taken in our office lobby. A man in a bank uniform talking to reception. I recognized him immediately even from the back. He came by this morning claiming to be your husband. Said there was a family emergency and he needed your contact information. Security turned him away, but he was asking a lot of questions. Taking photos of the building. The pad thai I'd eaten for lunch turned to lead in my stomach. What kind of questions? What floor you worked on? What time you usually arrived? If you'd mentioned where you lived. Jessica's expression darkened. Our receptionist got weird vibes and called security. Is this guy stalking you? I set down my coffee carefully. We're divorced. Or divorcing. I left him and he's not handling it well. Should we be worried? Do you need us to flag him in our security system? Yes. Please. And Jessica, if he comes back, don't tell him anything. Don't even confirm I work here. She squeezed my shoulder. Already done. Catherine's been notified too. We take this stuff seriously. That evening, I sat in my apartment trying to figure out how Frank had found my workplace. I'd been careful. No social media updates. No forwarding address. No paper trail. Then it hit me. My debit card. I'd been using it at the coffee shop near my office. At the grocery store 2 blocks away. At the Thai place I ordered from twice a week. Frank was a bank manager. He had access to transaction systems. He was tracking my purchases. The realization made me feel violated all over again. It wasn't enough that he'd humiliated me, used me, discarded me. Now he was using his professional access to hunt me down like I was some kind of asset he'd misplaced. I opened a new account at a different bank the next morning. Transferred every cent, closed the old account completely. Then I called the lawyer whose card Catherine had given me during my first week. Just in case, she'd said. Michelle Reeves picked up on the second ring. Reeves Law. How can I help you? My ex-husband is using his position as a bank manager to track my debit card transactions. He showed up at my workplace. Is that legal? Her voice sharpened. No. That's called data privacy violation and it's a federal offense. How certain are you that's what he's doing? Very certain. He's a manager at First National. I've changed banks, but I need to know what else I can do. Document everything. Every time he contacts you or shows up somewhere. Every call, every message, every sighting. We'll need that for a restraining order. She paused. And Elizabeth? What he's doing isn't just creepy. It's criminal. We're going to stop him. I hung up and looked around my small studio apartment. My safe space, my fresh start. Frank had taken 8 years of my life. He'd taken my savings, my dreams, my sense of self-worth. But he wasn't taking this. He wasn't taking my future. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything, starting with the day he'd handed me those divorce papers and called me dead weight. Frank wanted to find me? Fine. Let him find out what happened when dead weight finally stopped carrying you and started fighting back. The documentation took me 3 days to complete. Every voicemail Frank had left on Diane's phone. Every text to Marcus. Screenshots of my closed bank account with timestamps showing when I'd drained my half. Photos of his workplace appearance that Jessica had taken. The lawyer's contact information sat in my phone like a safety net I hoped I wouldn't need. But documenting Frank's stalking meant reliving it, and by the 3rd day I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Saturday morning I walked to the bookstore coffee shop on Pine Street, the one place in Seattle that had become mine. Not mine and Frank's. Not somewhere I went because I had to. Just mine. I ordered my usual overpriced latte and found my spot by the window where I could watch the rain and pretend to read while actually just existing without purpose or pressure. The shop was more crowded than usual. Every table full. People hunched over laptops or books or conversations that looked important. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up. The man standing there was maybe my age, with dark hair that needed a trim and glasses slightly fogged from the rain outside. He held a coffee in one hand and a worn paperback in the other. "It's all yours," I said, moving my bag. He sat down with an apologetic smile. "Thanks. Saturdays are brutal here. I usually come earlier but I slept in." I nodded and went back to my book, or tried to. But he was settling in across from me, and there was something about the way he carefully set down his coffee and opened his book that felt considerate. Like he was aware of sharing space and wanted to do it well. After a few minutes he glanced at my book. "Foundation series? You're reading Asimov." "Trying to. It's my 3rd attempt. I keep getting distracted by the politics and losing track of who's who." He laughed. "That's fair. The first book is dense. Gets better in the second one when you realize all the setup was worth it." We ended up talking for 3 hours. His name was James. He was a software engineer at a company downtown, originally from Portland, in Seattle for 2 years and still discovering the city. We talked about books. He loved science fiction, I loved mysteries. We talked about Seattle rain and whether it was actually worse than people claimed or just more persistent. We talked about terrible jobs we'd survived. "Medical billing and restaurant serving," I said when he asked. "Both at the same time for about 8 years. He winced. "That sounds exhausting." It was. I didn't elaborate. Didn't mention Frank or why I'd worked 2 jobs or any of it. And he didn't push. Didn't ask probing questions about my past or why I'd moved to Seattle or any of the things people usually asked. He just accepted what I offered and moved on. When he finally checked his phone and realized how long we'd been talking, he looked genuinely surprised. "Wow. I completely lost track of time." "Me too." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? There's this Vietnamese place near my apartment that does incredible pho." My immediate instinct was to say no. To protect myself. To keep my new life simple and uncomplicated. Then I thought about Frank calling me dead weight. About 8 years of making myself smaller so he could take up more space. About sitting alone in my apartment eating takeout while building a life that was safe but solitary. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." James's face lit up. "Really? Great. Can I get your number?" We exchanged numbers and he left with a wave and that same apologetic smile. I sat alone at the table for another hour, my coffee long cold, wondering what I'd just agreed to. Dating James felt like learning I'd been speaking the wrong language my entire adult life. On our first dinner date, when the check came, he reached for it automatically. I reached for it at the same time, the reflex of 8 years paying for everything. Our hands collided over the leather folder. "I've got this," he said. "We can split it." He looked genuinely confused. "Is that what you want? Because I asked you out so I figured I'd pay. But if you'd rather split, that's fine too." The question threw me. Frank had never asked what I wanted. He'd just assumed I'd handle it, and I had. "Split is good," I said. "Okay." He pulled out his card for half without any resentment or calculation about whose entree cost more. Our third date was a hike. One of Patricia's easier trails that I'd mentioned during dinner. James picked me up at 9, brought extra water and trail mix, and set a pace that matched mine instead of pulling ahead. Halfway up I stepped wrong on loose rocks. My ankle rolled and I went down hard, catching myself on my hands. Pain shot up my leg sharp enough to make my eyes water. "Liz, are you okay?" James was beside me immediately, kneeling in the dirt trail. I tried to stand and winced. "I think I twisted something." He helped me sit properly and carefully rolled up my pant leg to check the swelling. His hands were gentle, methodical. "It's not too bad. Can you put weight on it?" I tried. "Barely." "Not really." Frank would have sighed. Would have made some comment about how this ruined the hike or how we should have stayed home. I braced myself for it. Instead, James said, "But looks like we're taking the scenic route back. Slow and steady." He took my backpack and added it to his. "Lean on me. We'll get you down." It took us twice as long to get back to the parking lot. James made terrible jokes the entire way. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? What do you call a bear with no teeth? Dad jokes so bad I couldn't help laughing despite the pain. At his apartment, he set me up on his couch with ice and pillows and put on an old movie neither of us had seen. Comfort and distraction, he said. Best treatment for minor injuries. Sitting there with my ankle elevated, watching a movie I'd never remember the plot of, I realized something that made my chest tight. I felt safe. Actually safe. Not anxious about being a burden or worried about saying the wrong thing or calculating how much this inconvenience would cost me later. James caught me watching him instead of the screen. You okay? Need more ice? No. I'm good. This is good. I meant it more than he could know. The months that followed felt like living in color after years of grayscale. James and I fell into an easy rhythm. Dinners where we actually split checks. Weekend hikes with Patricia's group where he became a favorite because he always volunteered to carry the extra water. Quiet evenings at his place or mine where we cooked together and the cleanup was shared without discussion. He met my Seattle friends. Jessica from work, Patricia from hiking, Riley from next door. He fit in seamlessly, making everyone laugh, asking genuine questions, being present in a way Frank never had been. 6 months after I'd first walked into Seattle, I was reading at my usual coffee shop spot when someone sat down across from me without asking. I looked up, half expecting James, and froze. Frank. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His hands shook around the coffee cup he was holding. Elizabeth. My name came out rough like he'd been rehearsing it. Every instinct screamed at me to run. To grab my things and leave before he could say whatever he'd come here to say. But something made me stay. Curiosity maybe. Or the need to face him now that I was strong enough to do it without breaking. Frank. I closed my book carefully. How did you find me? I've been looking for months. I hired someone. I needed to talk to you. You hired someone to find me. The words tasted bitter. You know that's called stalking, right? I know. I know it is. But Elizabeth, I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I studied him across the table. The man I'd spent 8 years sacrificing for. The man who'd called me dead weight in front of his colleagues. He looked diminished somehow. Smaller. What do you want, Frank? I want to explain. I want. His voice cracked. I need you to understand what happened. The pressure. The expectations. Vanessa was in my ear telling me I needed a different kind of partner for my new position. Someone more polished. More than me, I finished. Someone who wasn't working 2 jobs to pay your bills. No, that's not. She was wrong. I was wrong. God, Liz, I was so wrong. He reached across the table like he might take my hand. I moved mine to my lap. I need you. Everything fell apart without you. The apartment. The bills. My life. I can't do this alone. There was the truth underneath all his apologies. You don't need me, Frank. You need what I did for you. My voice was steady. Come. You need someone to pay your bills and manage your life and make you feel successful. You need an employee, not a wife. That's not true. I love you. No. You love what I gave you. There's a difference. I stood and gathered my things. And just so you know, that position has been permanently filled. By Tobadi. I'm not anyone's support system anymore. Frank stood too desperate now. Please. Can we just talk? Really talk? I'll do better. I'll be better. Just give me a chance to prove. I'm engaged, Frank. The color drained from his face like I'd pulled a plug. He actually stumbled back a step. You're what? Engaged. To someone who actually sees me as an equal. Who doesn't think partnership means one person doing all the work while the other one takes all the credit. But the divorce isn't. The divorce was final 2 months ago. He got the paperwork. I know because I had to sign mine too. I shouldered my bag. You got exactly what you wanted that day at your promotion party. Freedom from dead weight. Congratulations. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. I walked past him toward the door. He didn't try to follow. Didn't call after me. When I glanced back from the doorway, he was still standing there by my table, looking at the space where I'd been sitting like he couldn't quite believe I'd disappeared again. Outside, the Seattle rain had started, light and persistent, the kind that soaked through everything if you stood in it long enough. I pulled out my phone and texted James. Coffee shop confrontation with ex. I'm fine. Actually better than fine. Can I come over? His response came within seconds. Doors unlocked. I'll put the kettle on. I walked through the rain toward James's apartment, and for the first time since Frank had handed me those divorce papers, I felt completely free. Not free from something. Free for something. Free to build a life that was mine. James's apartment smelled like Earl Grey tea and old books. He'd already put the kettle on by the time I arrived, my hair dripping rain, my hands still shaking from the encounter with Frank. Sit, he said, guiding me to his couch. Tell me what happened. I told him everything. The coffee shop. Frank's appearance. His claims about making a mistake. The way he'd looked at me like I was something he'd lost and desperately needed back. James listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. He hired someone to find you, he finally said. That's not remorse, Liz. That's obsession. I know. Does he know about me? About us? I told him I was engaged. I don't think he believed me. James took my hand. Maybe we should make it real then. Not because of him, but because I was planning to ask you anyway. I looked at him startled. James. Not now. Not like this. When the time is right and it has nothing to do with your ex. He squeezed my hand. But I want you to know that's where I'm headed. So you don't think this is just some protective instinct. I'm in this, Liz. For real. Something in my chest loosened. Hey. When the time is right. I thought that would be the end of it. That Frank would accept reality and disappear back to whatever life he'd built without me. I was wrong. 2 days later, Catherine called me to the lobby at work. Her expression was tight with concern. There's someone here asking for you. I told reception to stall him, but Liz, it feels wrong. Do you want me to call security? My stomach dropped. What does he look like? Tall, brown hair, wearing a bank uniform. Says his name is Frank and it's urgent. I closed my eyes briefly. Call security. Now. When I got to the lobby, Frank was there. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled. He was holding flowers. Roses, expensive ones, like they were evidence of something. Like they could undo months of stalking and harassment. The moment he saw me, relief washed over his face. Elizabeth. Thank God. I just need 5 minutes. Please. Jessica and Thomas were in the lobby. So were 2 clients waiting for appointments. Everyone was watching this play out like it was entertainment. The humiliation of his promotion party flashed through my mind. How he'd handed me divorce papers in front of his colleagues. How he'd called me dead weight while they whispered and laughed. How he'd made my pain public for his convenience. Now he was doing it again. Showing up at my workplace. Making a scene. Forcing me to deal with him in front of my coworkers and clients. Making my private hell into public spectacle. Elizabeth, please, he said, stepping closer. I know you're angry. I know I messed up. But we can fix this. I'll do better. I'll be better. Just give me a chance. I didn't speak to him. Instead, I turned to Catherine and said, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. This man is harassing me. I need security. Frank's face crumpled. What? Oh. Liz, that's not. I'm just trying to talk to you. You hired someone to track me down after I left the state. You showed up at a coffee shop 6 months after our divorce. Now you're at my workplace disrupting my professional life. That's not talking. That's stalking. 2 security guards emerged from the elevator. Frank looked at them, then back at me, desperation making him wild. You can't do this, he said as they approached. I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? No, I said simply. It doesn't. Not anymore. I already did, I replied, my voice steady. The same way you did it to me. Publicly. Remember? At your promotion party when you handed me divorce papers and humiliated me in front of everyone you worked with? This is what that feels like, Frank. This is what it's like when someone makes your pain into a spectacle. The guards took his arms. Frank didn't resist, but he kept staring at me like I was speaking a language he couldn't understand. I'm sorry, he said as they led him toward the exit. I'm so sorry, Liz. For everything. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix what you broke. After they escorted him out, Catherine put a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? Not really. But I will be. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Frank's face in the lobby. The flowers he'd dropped when security took him. The way he'd said he loved me like that made everything okay. At 2 in the morning I got up and spread everything on my kitchen table. Every piece of evidence I'd been collecting. Credit card statements showing hotel charges. Vanessa's birthday card. Screenshots of blocked calls. I counted them. 247. Records from my old bank showing his manager-level access viewing my transaction history after I'd closed the account. Photos Jessica had taken of him in our lobby before security arrived. James came over at 7 looking exhausted. He'd been up late working but came straight from home when I texted. This is stalking, he said quietly, looking at the evidence spread across my table. This is also identity fraud. Data breach. Harassment. Liz, this isn't just creepy ex-boyfriend behavior. These are crimes. I know. You need a restraining order. Today. And you need to report what he did with the bank systems. I've been avoiding it because I didn't want to be tied to him anymore. Didn't want more court dates and lawyers and having to see him. James took my hand. I get that. But he's not going to stop. He showed up at your work. What's next? Your apartment? What if he follows you somewhere you're alone? The thought made my skin crawl. Hey. I'll call a lawyer. Michelle Reeves had kind eyes and zero patience for nonsense. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. Your ex-husband has committed multiple felonies. Using his position to access your financial records is a federal crime. Showing up at your workplace after being told to stop is harassment. Hiring someone to track you across state lines escalates this into something much more serious. What do I do? We file for a restraining order immediately. Today. And I'm strongly recommending you file a complaint with the State Banking Commission. What he did with customer data systems isn't just unethical. It's a violation that could cost him his license. My hands were shaking. Will I have to see him? In court. Yes. For the restraining order hearing. But I'll be with you and it's usually brief. The judge reviews the evidence and makes a ruling. And the Banking Commission? That's a separate investigation. You'll give a statement, provide evidence, and they'll handle it from there. Frank will be suspended pending the investigation. If they find wrongdoing, and based on what you've told me they will, he'll face termination and a permanent mark on his professional record. I thought about Frank's face when he'd been promoted to manager. The pride. The certainty that he'd finally made it. That glass office had been his dream, the thing he'd sacrificed our marriage for. Now I was about to take it away. Do it, I said. File everything. The complaint to the Banking Commission required a formal statement. I sat across from an investigator named Peterson, mid-50s, tired eyes, the expression of someone who'd seen every variation of corporate misconduct. Walk me through the timeline, he said, pen ready. I did. From the moment I'd noticed Frank tracking my debit card purchases to his appearance at my workplace. Peterson's expression grew darker with each detail. Did Mr. Caldwell have legitimate business reasons to access your accounts? No. We were divorced. He was using his manager access to track my location. And you have proof of this? I showed him the documentation. Peterson photographed each page. Miss Caldwell. It's just Elizabeth now. I went back to my maiden name. Miss Harper then. What Mr. Caldwell did is a serious violation of federal privacy laws. He'll be immediately suspended pending investigation. If our findings confirm what you've reported, and I have no reason to doubt they will, he'll be terminated and reported to federal regulators. He won't work in banking again. Good, I said and meant it. The restraining order hearing was 3 days later. Frank showed up in a suit that looked like he'd slept in it. His public defender was young, overwhelmed, clearly underpaid and overassigned. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse. She reviewed my evidence in silence. The call logs. The tracked transactions. The workplace visit. When she looked up, her face was hard. Mr. Caldwell, she said. You've used your professional position to stalk your ex-wife across state lines. You've shown up at her place of employment despite being asked to stop. You've made hundreds of unwanted contact attempts. This behavior is obsessive, illegal, and deeply concerning. Your Honor, I was just trying to, Frank started. You were just trying to control someone who left you, the judge interrupted. That's what stalking is, Mr. Caldwell. Control disguised as love. She granted the restraining order immediately. 500 feet minimum distance. No contact of any kind. Violation punishable by immediate arrest. As we left the courthouse, Frank tried to approach me one more time. 2 bailiffs blocked him before he got within 20 feet. She's not your wife anymore, one said flatly. And she's not your problem to solve. Go home, Mr. Caldwell. Frank looked at me over the bailiff's shoulder. His expression was devastated, lost, like he couldn't understand how we'd gotten here. I looked back and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No sadness. Just relief that it was finally over. Michelle walked me to my car. That was the easy part, she said. Now comes the hard part. Rebuilding without constantly looking over your shoulder. Can you do that? I thought about my apartment. My job. James. Patricia and the hiking group. The life I'd built piece by piece after Frank had tried to reduce me to nothing. Yeah, I said. I can do that. And I meant it. The restraining order became my safety net. For the first time in months, I could breathe without constantly checking over my shoulder. Frank couldn't call. Couldn't text. Couldn't show up at my work or my apartment or anywhere I existed. For 3 months, silence. Then Diane called. Liz, you need to hear this. Her voice was strange, not quite happy, not quite sad. Frank got suspended from the bank. I was at my desk at work, halfway through processing a complicated billing dispute. Suspended. The Banking Commission investigation. They found everything. Unauthorized access to customer data. Privacy violations. The works. She paused. He's being fired, Liz. Not reassigned. Not allowed to resign quietly. Terminated. With a notation in his file that'll follow him to every financial institution in the country. I set down my pen carefully. Oh. There's more. Vanessa got demoted. Apparently she knew what Frank was doing and encouraged it. The bank issued this whole internal memo about data privacy and professional conduct. Everyone knows it's about Frank. I waited for the satisfaction to hit. The sense of justice. The feeling that Frank was finally facing consequences for what he'd done. Dad, I just felt tired. He's completely ruined, Diane continued. His career is over. His reputation is destroyed. Liz, are you okay? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for telling me. That's it? That's all you have to say? What else is there to say? He did this to himself. After we hung up, I stared at my computer screen for a long time. Frank had spent 8 years building toward that manager position. It had been his entire identity, his measure of success, the thing he'd sacrificed our marriage for. Now it was gone, and I felt nothing. 6 weeks after the restraining order was issued, Frank violated it. James and I were at my apartment making dinner, his night to cook, so he was attempting pasta from scratch while I chopped vegetables and tried not to laugh at his flour-covered face. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then something made me pick up. Ms. Harper? This is Officer Chin with Seattle PD. We have a Frank Caldwell in custody for violating a restraining order. He was found outside your building. Are you home right now? My stomach dropped. Yes. I'm home. Stay inside. Lock your doors. We're sending a patrol car to check the perimeter and take your statement. James took the phone from my shaking hands and got the details while I walked to the window. Rain streaked the glass, making everything outside blur. And there, on the sidewalk across the street, 2 police officers were handcuffing someone. Frank. He wasn't fighting. Wasn't running. Just standing there in the rain, letting them cuff him, staring up at my window like he could will me to come down and save him. Don't look, James said, pulling me away from the window. You don't need to see this. But I'd already seen it. Frank's face. Desperate, lost, destroyed. The officer who came to take my statement was kind. Do you want to press charges? You have every right to, given the restraining order violation. I thought about saying no. About letting him go with a warning. About being the bigger person. Then I thought about 8 years of making myself smaller so Frank could be bigger. 8 years of saying yes when I meant no. 8 years of being too nice. Yes, I said. I want to press charges. Every time he does this, he's telling me my boundaries don't matter. I'm done teaching that lesson. Frank spent 3 nights in jail. When he got out, Diane told me he'd packed up and moved back to his hometown 6 hours away. His manager dreams scattered like ashes. His career in ruins. His life unrecognizable. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt relieved it was finally over. James proposed on a mountain trail in April, 6 months after Frank's arrest. Patricia's hiking group was there. She'd helped him plan it, setting up a surprise picnic at the summit. When I reached the top, exhausted and happy, they were all waiting with champagne and flowers and huge smiles. James got down on one knee on a rock overlooking the Cascades. Elizabeth Harper, you're the strongest person I know. You rebuilt your entire life from nothing and made something beautiful. I want to spend the rest of my life building something with you. Will you marry me? I said yes before he finished the question. Everyone cheered. Patricia cried. Someone popped the champagne and we toasted on the mountaintop while the sun set over Seattle. Later, when we were planning the wedding, I thought about Frank. About whether to send him an invitation. A final proof that I'd not only survived but thrived. That dead weight had learned to fly. Michelle, my lawyer, talked me out of it. You've made your point, she said during one of our final consultations. He violated a restraining order and went to jail. His career is over. He knows you moved on and got engaged. You don't need to rub his nose in your happiness. Just be happy. That's the best revenge. He was right. Frank didn't deserve a seat at my new beginning, not even as a ghost haunting the periphery. But I did send an announcement to his parents. They'd been kind people. His mother had called me after the divorce to apologize for her son's behavior. His father had sent a card saying he was ashamed of how Frank had treated me. His mother wrote back within a week. You deserved better than what Frank gave you. I'm glad you found it. Be happy, Elizabeth. That's all we ever wanted for you. The note was brief, but it closed a door I hadn't realized was still open. Frank's parents understood. They didn't excuse him or ask me to forgive him. They just acknowledged the truth and wished me well. That felt like enough. The rest of Frank's story came to me through the grapevine. Bits and pieces from Diane, from mutual acquaintances, from his mother's occasional updates. He was working at a small credit union in his hometown. A job processing loan applications, nowhere near management. Lucky to get hired at all given the notation on his record. He was living in a rental apartment, driving a car held together with duct tape and prayers. And Vanessa, the woman he'd left me for, the one who'd told him he needed a more appropriate partner, had married him 6 months after our divorce. They'd lasted 11 months before she filed for divorce, citing financial irresponsibility and emotional unavailability. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frank had thrown away 8 years with someone who'd supported him unconditionally, chasing someone who left the moment things got hard. He burned through his savings, Diane reported during one of our calls. She still kept tabs on Frank through work connections. Had to move in with his parents for a while. His dad got him the credit union job. That's rough, I said and meant it. Not because I felt sorry for Frank, but because anyone's life falling apart was rough to watch, even from a distance. He asks about you sometimes, Diane added carefully. Wants to know if you're happy. I looked around my apartment. Mine and James's now, since he'd moved in last month. Our hiking gear by the door. Our shared bookshelf. Photos from Patricia's group covering the fridge. A life we'd built together, equal parts his and mine. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him I'm happy in a way he'll never understand. And then tell him to stop asking. Because that was the truth. I was happy. Not happy because Frank's life had fallen apart. That brought me no joy. Just happy because I'd finally built a life that was mine. Where I wasn't carrying anyone. Where I wasn't dead weight or support system or ATM with legs. Just Elizabeth. Building something real with someone who saw me as an equal. Frank had wanted a fresh start without me. He got it. And somewhere along the way I'd gotten mine too. The difference was mine was working. The wedding planning moved forward. Small ceremony. Close friends and family only. Patricia officiating. James's software engineer friends mixing with my hiking group and my coworkers from the tech company. No ghosts invited. No past haunting the periphery. Just a future we were building together one day at a time with no one carrying more weight than they should. And if Frank heard about it through the grapevine and realized what he'd lost, well, that wasn't my problem anymore. Some foundations, once you tear them down, can't be rebuilt. Frank was learning that the hard way. And I was learning something different. That being called dead weight by someone who'd been drowning you doesn't mean you can't fly. It just means they were never looking up. The wedding took place in a garden in late September, 2 years after I'd signed divorce papers in a conference room and walked away from 8 years of my life. 70 guests. Not hundreds of Frank's colleagues who barely knew my name. Just 70 people who actually wanted to be there. Patricia officiated, wearing a dress instead of her usual hiking gear, reading vows James and I had written that promised partnership, not servitude. Equality, not sacrifice. My mother cried happy tears in the front row. Marcus walked me down the aisle grinning like he'd won a bet with the universe. Which, in a way, he had. He told me years ago that Frank was using me. Now he got to watch me marry someone who didn't. Catherine from work caught the bouquet and immediately joked. Well, I guess I finally have to download that dating app. Everyone laughed. The whole day felt light, joyful, free from the weight of anyone's expectations but our own. During our first dance, James pulled me close and whispered, "You know what's wild? I get to keep you." I laughed, thinking about Frank's face when he'd called me dead weight. When he'd thrown me away like I was something disposable he'd outgrown. "I get to keep you too," I said. "That's the better deal." "How do you figure?" "Because I know what it's like to be with someone who doesn't want to keep you. This is better." He kissed my forehead. "So much better." The house we bought 6 months after the wedding was modest. 2 bedrooms, small yard, floors that creaked when you walked across them. Nothing like the luxury condos on Frank's Pinterest board. Nothing like the life he'd imagined for himself. But it was ours. Both our names on the mortgage. Both our paychecks going into one joint account we actually managed together. No secrets, no separate investment accounts, no financial hierarchy. We developed routines that felt revolutionary in their simplicity. James cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I cooked Mondays and Wednesdays. Weekends we figured out together, sometimes ordering takeout, sometimes experimenting with new recipes that didn't always work but were always fun to try. When bills came, we split them down the middle. When one of us had a bad day, the other listened without making it about themselves or finding a way to be the victim. It was so simple it felt like a miracle. One Sunday morning we were washing dishes together. Him washing, me drying, when I realized I was happy. Not relieved. Not grateful. Not recovering. Just happy. "Is this normal?" I asked. James handed me a plate. "Is what normal?" "This. Feeling like we're on the same team. Like we're partners instead of one person carrying the other." He dried his hands and pulled me close, soap suds still on his shirt. "I think it's normal for people who actually love each other. Maybe that's what you never had with Frank." I rested my head against his chest. I thought love meant sacrifice. Meant working yourself to death so the other person could succeed. That's not love. That's servitude. He kissed the top of my head. Love is what happens when 2 people decide to build something together. Equal weight. Equal voice. Equal effort. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. You taught me what not to do by telling me what Frank did. 2 years after the wedding, Catherine announced her retirement. She called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon, her expression unreadable. "I'm recommending you for my position," she said without preamble. "Billing director. The executive team wants to interview you next week." My stomach dropped. "Catherine, I don't know if I'm ready." "You're ready. You've been ready for months. The question is whether you believe it." The interview was intimidating. 3 executives asking rapid-fire questions about leadership philosophy, conflict resolution, department management. Questions designed to see how I handled pressure. One of them, a woman named Dr. Carson, asked, What have you learned from your previous work experience that would inform your leadership style? Thought about Frank. About 8 years of being called supportive like it was a limitation instead of a strength. About working 2 jobs while he studied. About being introduced as helpful, never as equal. I learned that real leadership isn't about climbing over people, I said. It's about building systems where everyone can succeed. I learned that the most valuable person in any organization isn't the one at the top. It's the foundation they're standing on. And I learned that if you treat people like they're disposable, eventually they'll leave and take their value with them. Dr. Carson smiled. When can you start? The promotion came with a salary that made me blink when I saw the offer letter. Enough that James and I could finally take that Hawaii vacation I'd dreamed about 15 years ago with a different man in a different life. We went for our 3rd anniversary. 7 days on Maui. No work emails. No emergencies. Just us and the ocean and the kind of peace I'd thought was reserved for other people. On our last day we hiked a trail Patricia had recommended, challenging but manageable with a view at the top that made the climb worth it. Standing at the summit looking out over the Pacific, James put his arm around me. Happy anniversary, he said. 3 years. Can you believe it? Honestly, though, sometimes I still can't believe you said yes when I asked to share your table at that coffee shop. I laughed. Best coffee shop crowding in history. We sat on the rocks at the summit, drinking water and eating the trail mix James always overpacked. That's when I thought about Frank for the first time in months. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Not even with satisfaction at how his life had fallen apart. Just with a kind of distant anthropological curiosity about how someone could misunderstand value so completely. Frank had thought he was trading up. Thought he was cashing me out like a bad investment before I could drag him down. What he'd actually done was destroy his own foundation and then spend years in free fall, grasping for something he'd already thrown away. He called me dead weight. Had looked at 8 years of my sacrifice and decided I was the thing holding him back. But dead weight doesn't build a new life from scratch. Doesn't earn promotions based on merit. Doesn't marry someone who sees them as an equal and build a partnership that actually works. Dead weight doesn't stand on a mountain in Hawaii feeling powerful and free and completely, utterly happy. I wasn't dead weight. I never had been. I was compound interest. Quiet, steady, building value over time until the balance became undeniable. Frank had gotten his fresh start. His freedom from the person he thought was dragging him down. His chance to build the life he'd pinned on that Pinterest board. And I'd gotten something infinitely better. A life so rich that his absence felt like the greatest gift he'd ever given me. What are you thinking about? James asked, watching my face. Frank, actually. He tensed slightly. Yeah. I was thinking about how he thought discarding me was his promotion. How he genuinely believed I was the problem. I looked at James. And I was thinking about how wrong he was. How I wasn't the dead weight. I was the foundation. And when the foundation walks away, the whole building collapses. Did his building collapse? Completely. Lost his job. Lost his second wife. Lost everything he thought made him successful. I took James's hand. But I'm not happy because he failed. I'm happy because I succeeded. Because I built something real. Because I learned that being called dead weight by someone who was drowning me doesn't mean I can't fly. James pulled me close. You're not flying. You're soaring. We sat there until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around us, other hikers took photos and celebrated reaching the summit. Below us, the island stretched out green and alive and beautiful. Somewhere far away, Frank was probably working his credit union job. Probably living in his rental apartment. Probably still wondering how everything had fallen apart. And I was here. On a mountain. With a man who loved me as an equal. Living a life I'd built from nothing but determination and the refusal to let someone else's opinion define my worth. Account closed. Interest compounded. New life secured. Frank had wanted to know if I was happy. Diane had asked me what to tell him. I knew the answer now, 3 years and a lifetime away from that conference room where he'd called me dead weight. Tell him yes. Tell him I'm happy in a way he'll never understand. Tell him I built something beautiful from the ashes of what he burned down. And then tell him to stop asking. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's not public humiliation or professional ruin or watching someone's life fall apart. The best revenge is becoming so completely, authentically happy that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant. A footnote in a story that's no longer about them at all. Frank had been my whole world for 8 years. Now he was barely a memory. And that, more than anything else, proved I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed him, but because I'd saved myself. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. If this story of silent revenge and quiet triumph kept you hooked until the very end, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Elizabeth signed those divorce papers without hesitation, walked out with shrimp in hand and vanished completely. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.